flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a series of inspirational conversations with renowned culinary leaders. Discover how their cultural identity shapes their creative process. With your host, Emmanuel.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
It's really good to have you on the show, and I'm very excited to be able to have a conversation about what you do, and as well, the role of the World Central Kitchens. It's great. It's definitely a different profile of guests, on the show. So I'm sure people who is listening to to Flavors Unknown are going to be really glad that you decided to join. So obviously, I'm going to start with asking you, what does it mean? I mean, to be a director of Chef Corps, at World Central Kitchen.
You got it. I would ask, how familiar you think your audience might be with World Central Kitchen in general?
Yes, I am assuming, because a lot of people listening to the show are chefs. But you are correct that there's maybe some other guests that are maybe foodies, and maybe they've heard about it. Obviously, they know Chef José Andrés, but maybe not World Central Kitchen. So please.
You got it. I'll do the real quick version, but I know you have an international audience, and while we're trying for world domination over here, there are some places where we still need some recognition so that people know who we are. We are in our 16th year, so we were founded in 2010 when Jose went down to Haiti, and basically he went on kind of a listening tour after those really devastating earthquakes, and he was looking at the state of disaster feeding food. What he saw was a lot of room for improvement. They were kind of these, MRE type meals, and he had this light bulb moment that, his whole profession of chefs and cooks should really be a part of the solution. Mm-hmm. And then we had a couple other big moments leading up till now. So Hurricane Maria in 2017, that's when we really had to figure out how to feed an entire island, where we formulated a lot of our strategies, a lot of our core values. And then I would say the pandemic was another big one because the need was so great. Mm-hmm. We, I think, ended up working with 4,000 restaurants across the U.S. alone to get people fed, both people that were homebound and needed meals and taking care of nurses and doctors who are working in hospitals. And then, here we are today. So we have served over 600 million meals around the world. The two most important things to us remain speed and urgency, so getting those first meals out as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. We don't want to wait for meetings. We don't want to wait for permission sometimes. We just want to start cooking. As people are hungry, they're hungry now. And the second most important thing, and both of these feed into my role in my program, the second most important thing is that our responses, wherever we are, that they be locally led, driven by the community, mm-hmm. And that helps contribute to making sure that the meals we're serving are culturally appropriate and that we're taking care of communities with dignity.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we're active all over. For the longest time, we only responded to kind of natural disasters. There's floods, tornadoes, hurricanes. And then when Russia invaded Ukraine, that was our first shot at supporting people in an active conflict zone. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I think a lot of people heard about us for the first time because of our work in Gaza and throughout the Middle East.
You were mentioning about the balance between, really reacting quickly, obviously, because, this is very dramatic situations, and as well, the importance of being culturally relevant. I'm curious about how much of Chef Corps, is about cultural listening and not just speed.
So much, absolutely. It's both in equal parts. And so basically, I came on 4 years ago. I pitched the organization on really kind of formalizing a program for prominent culinary leaders, some of mm-hmm. whom were already helping us. But I really wanted to take this to the next level to help us meet both of those goals. And the main idea is that chefs are some of the most trusted and connected people in their communities, and they always have been. From your many conversations with chefs, they're also very good at problem solving. They're great in chaos. They handle that every day in their own kitchens. So they're actually really well suited for disaster response. But for my purposes, I'm looking for people who are the real culinary mayors of their cities, the people who've had businesses there for a long time. They have the reach and kind of the trusted reputations to help us make an immediate impact if we have to head and respond to an emergency in their backyard. And so this started 4 years ago, and now I'm up to 580 chefs around the world. Yep, so their role is primarily to kind of be our local liaison, our local connector if we're headed their way. You know, first, they are one of our first calls to tell us what they're hearing, what they're seeing. Sometimes what we are observing in the media isn't always fully accurate. So, for example, we responded to a really bad earthquake in Cebu in the Philippines last year. And, you know, the news reports didn't make it look like it was that big of a deal. But as soon as we started contacting our local chefs, our other local contacts, you know, they said, yeah, this is the big one, get here right now. And, you know, they were correct. And so we like to have these trusted sources on the ground to feed us that early information. And then if we do decide to respond and send a full team, you know, that's when we call our chef corps members back and our asks get very specific. You know, to your point, we're not just asking them, do you have connections to a place that we could set up as a kitchen and start cooking? Or, you know, what are your favorite food suppliers that we can begin buying local ingredients from? We're also really leaning on them for their cultural knowledge. Everything from, in your city, are there any neighborhoods where we might need to provide halal or kosher meals? Where do the most vulnerable populations live so we can make sure we take care of them first? Just kind of advising us on cultural norms, things that help us build trust very quickly. That's kind of their main role, is to kind of introduce us and make sure, you know, we're not coming in there like cowboys. We're coming in there respectfully and following kind of local cultural guidance.
And it goes until like up to the choice of the type of dishes that you are going to feed them with, or, you know, prepare for them, correct? Because the idea is that you want to have that connection with something that they feel comforted, you know, by, and you know, not to cook something that will not be relevant to their culture.
Yes, fantastic, exactly. So I think what might be helpful to know is that there's two main ways that World Central Kitchen provides meals after emergencies. The first is kind of the one that people think of, where we will find or build a kitchen and do most of the cooking ourselves. And ourselves is kind of a loose term because we only send a small staff. And then we bring on lots of local volunteers. And by the end of day 3, we've hired most of these local volunteers as our cooks, as our dishwashers, as our distribution managers, everything that needs to happen to get these meals into hands of people who need them. And so I think most recently you met Chef Isaac Villaverde in Panama City.
Yep.
So he came and volunteered in our giant kitchen in Jamaica, for example.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in that kitchen, we had 12 of our giant paella pots going with local dishes, lots of like jerk chicken, lots of curry rice. My sneakers are still stained bright yellow from my time down there. So Isaac was volunteering as a chef corps member, helping to man those pots. They were making 50,000 meals a day out of that kitchen. So that's one way. And the other way that, again, kind of came out of the pandemic is we partner with local restaurants, food trucks, caterers, and even food banks. And we basically reimburse them for the meals they make for their neighbors in need. So we'll call up a caterer and say, you know, are you operable? Can your staff get there safely? Do you have food? Do you have water? And if they say yes, then we'll say, great, can you do 500 lunches a day for the next 5 days? You know, this is the price that we can offer. And so that is a second way of making sure that the meals we're serving are familiar. You know, they're from businesses that are rooted in the community. They know what their neighbors like, and it's keeping money in the local economy, which is super important to us. An example of this one is after Hurricane Helene in Asheville, you know, surprised the pants off everybody, because who thought inland North Carolina would have a hurricane? So one of the chef corps members we contacted was Katie Button of Curate, and her restaurant had power, but it didn't have water, and you obviously can't cook safely without clean water. And so what we did to get them back online is we installed a giant water tank behind the restaurant. So then, boom, they had water, they could cook. And because we could buy meals for them, that also meant that she could keep her staff employed. And sometimes, when these disasters happen, everything stops dead in its tracks and the economy grinds to a halt. When I talked to her, reflecting on this experience, that the most valuable thing was being able to keep our staff working. And so either if we're cooking in our own kitchen, we're hiring locals, or if we're working with restaurant partners, we're supporting small local businesses. And so either way, we're kind of guaranteed to serve local flavors.
Okay. I just wanted to, we went like directly into the actions and then examples and so on. But, I'd almost like when you back up a bit and when we had the first conversation in DC together, I think I asked you that question, which is how do you go about mapping the regions where a relationship, should be built in advance, because that's, role. So I'm curious, and of course, obviously don't mention anything if it's sensitive, but
no, not at all.
Otherwise, I would be interested to that you talk about that.
Yeah, you got it. I think it's no secret, the bad news is that we're going to be needed more places than we ever thought possible, right? These natural disasters are happening with greater frequency, with greater ferocity. They're happening in unexpected places. I think as resources start to dwindle, we're going to see more conflicts over resources like water. And so really the possibilities of where WCK could respond are pretty unlimited. We found ourselves in surprising places. I don't know if you remember, but like Hurricane Fiona swung up and hit Nova Scotia. There's the flooding in unexpected places. So I'm mostly a team of one and am tasked with covering the whole world. I do appreciate this question because I do, sometimes have to prioritize. So we obviously look at places where we've responded before, where we're likely to respond, just based on research and mapping of, fire hotspots, volcano hotspots, fault lines, things like that. My focus is expansion in Asia. We've been spending a lot more time there. So I actually just hired a woman in Manila in the Philippines. Her name's Bea, who's helping me strictly focus on Asia. So that's a big thing right now. But yeah, in the United States, it's fire country, which is growing. It's along the coasts, places like Houston and New Orleans, Miami, along the coast of California.
Yeah.
But I have to really look everywhere. I had to activate a Chef Corps member in Cape Cod just 2 months ago because the entire peninsula froze over. So we had to take care of them. So yeah, I wish I had an easy answer, but we do have people on staff whose entire job it is to kind of keep tabs on where patterns are trending so that we can keep that in mind. And one other thing that's interesting is that these Chef Corps members, they play another role. They are our ambassadors. Their job is to help, talk about World Central Kitchen and our mission and why they support us and their communities to help us build trust in advance, right? Sometimes they'll do press interviews, they'll do social media campaigns, they'll speak or cook at an event. And so I work closely also with our communications and development team to make sure that we have Chef Corps ambassadors in places where we're looking for fresh donor bases. So we're looking into the United Kingdom and Canada and Australia, Spain, places that we know that we're looking to grow our supporters. And one way of doing that is through chefs. So I guess my answer is I still have to cover the whole world.
No, yeah, I know. But, again, when you approach those chefs, for the first time, what do you need them to really understand about like the WCK's mission?
Mm-hmm. I think that the thing that really gets them to an easy yes is two things. Hospitality industry professionals are always the first to raise their hands, always. And so what we can offer is to make that easy for them, right? We can come in with our giant logistics operation and make it easy for them to help because they know they want to, they just don't know how, or it would take them time or resources to get moving. So, when they hear that gets them excited. And the mission is so simple. Bowl of food is incredibly powerful and during people's darkest moments, right? So the mission is simple, kind of giving them the logistics really helps. And then I also am transparent that this is a relatively low time commitment charitable engagement because all the people that you have on your show, they're involved in so many things, right? And that's why you have them on because chefs are such incredible members of their communities. And so when I tell them, this is mostly tied to a disaster and throughout the year it'll be hopefully relatively quiet, but the 3 days I need you, I really need you. That kind of helps them. But yeah, and then when I explain to them the urgency piece and the kind of the dignity and the culturally appropriate meals kind of thing that really resonates with them, because that's exactly how they want to care for people.
And so, obviously you describe, the personality and, the character of, of like a chef, and they are, resilience. They are used to face, hardship and in their day-to-day. But, working in a kitchen or in kitchens, if they have several restaurants, and it's one thing, but being transported into, a place of crisis, it's really different. So are you looking for, now that you have done this, for several years, are you looking for like certain, trait of like, additional, personality traits, or that you think by engaging with those individuals in advance, you can say, okay, this one is going to work, or this one maybe not?
Yeah, I for all kinds of things, and I have some examples. But going back to Jamaica and Chef Isaac, who you met, when the culinary team on the ground said, Laura, we have some spots for you to send Chef Corps volunteers to come in and cook with us. That isn't always the case. Those opportunities are actually fairly rare, because we try to stay away from like voluntourism at World Central Kitchen. It's antithetical to our mission of empowering local communities. But once in a while, when it's a big operation or it really makes sense, I'm able to send people. And for that one, my colleague said, Laura, send us your Chef Corps members who are the best mentors, right? Every chef is a teacher, whether they like it or not. Some of them just really do a better job than others. And so I said, absolutely, I'll send you our best mentor chefs. And that's because they really wanted to keep our team of hundreds of Jamaica cooks motivated and inspired. They were really long, hot days in that kitchen, so that helped. And then, we also wanted to leave these Jamaican professionals with skills that they could use for the rest of their careers once we were gone. So in that case, like really great mentor chefs can be helpful. Our Chef Corps members aren't just restaurant chefs. We have all kinds of people, so I look for different kinds of characteristics. So another chef that went to Jamaica is this guy, David McCallum. He has the very cool job of being the head of food and beverage for the entire Los Angeles Olympics coming up in 2028. So that's a big job, and that involves high volume. So he's a great systems guy. Like, we would call him kind of early on in a response to like check and see, did we maximally set up our kitchen? Like, could our supply chain processes be improved? So that kind of thinking can be really helpful too. Or chefs with really specialized cultural knowledge. I'd love to tell you about a woman named Chef Amy Foote, if that's okay. So she is in Anchorage, Alaska. And when we first met her, she was the executive chef at a hospital in Anchorage that treats entirely native populations of Alaska. There's about 230 native tribes there. And they all would come to this hospital for their serious medical care. So you can imagine that Amy is an expert in what all of these tribes eat, like during times of comfort, right? Because they were at this hospital. She since took a job as the director of indigenous cuisine for a food service company called NMS. And she basically has dedicated her entire career to indigenous foodways and supporting indigenous food systems. And so when World Central Kitchen responded to a typhoon that really just wiped out a lot of indigenous villages along the kind of the west coast of Alaska, she was our first call, just like she's supposed to be. And, she first was able to introduce us to tribal leaders and to tribal organizations so that we could introduce ourselves and share what our goals were. Later, her company became one of our restaurant partners at the arena in Anchorage, where we were serving people who were sheltering there. She made sure, we were serving salmon head soup. We were serving just like the most familiar meals that we could.
Yeah.
And then she also helped our supply chain team by getting us our coho salmon provider. Just right there, she was supporting multiple different units of World Central Kitchen. But really, we went to her first because of her deep knowledge of indigenous cuisine. So when I'm recruiting chefs, I would say it's more art than science. I'm looking for just like a real kind of wow factor of these specialized skills that people can support us with, as well as just kind of, generally being super connected in their communities.
Okay. Just an idea, the thoughts here, because, there's people, as you said, outside of the US as well, listening to the podcast. So there's maybe areas in the world that in fact you feel that you are missing, point of contacts that, if you want to mention. I don't know if this is the way of doing it, but why not?
Sure.
I remember you, in fact, that's how we met, and you reached out to me because of the publication of, my book, A Taste of Madagascar. And unfortunately, there was like a cyclone that destroyed a big city in Tuamasina on the Indian Ocean. So that's how we connected, and I was able to, give you some point of contact in the capital. So I know there's places probably, around the world that you're still missing for point of contact.
Yes, I will definitely share some. But first, I want to make sure you're not underselling how helpful you were. That was very
Come
cool.
on.
So
it was the minimum, really the least I could do.
Yeah. My background, my professional background is as a journalist covering the food industry, and I did some investigative work. So one thing I'm very good at is finding people. So I think I hit you up on every social media platform.
I know.
I found your phone number.
And you found my phone number. And there was a day that I was so busy, and then I remember when I pick up the phone, because usually I don't, and then I was supposed to go, for my book signing in Washington, D.C. the week after, or, the 1 or 2 weeks after. And I saw Washington, D.C., so I said, maybe it's because of the book. So that's why I picked up. And you said, I've been reaching out to you on your social media since 8 this morning. And I'm like, I was so busy that day I didn't check any of my social media. So yeah, that was funny.
But you did exactly, what we would ask a Chef Corps member to do. You connected us with the 3 chefs on the ground who know the most people and who have a lot of knowledge to share about Malagasy cuisine. And so you were basically an acting Chef Corps member in that moment. So thank you again so much for that. And yeah, we ended up doing close to 200,000 meals during that response. And we now have kind of infrastructure in there for if we have to respond again. And I think, we all loved learning about the culture there, and can see very well why you wanted to write a book about it, because it's a very, very beautiful place for sure.
Yeah. So just if we use that example, so I remember when you called me, there was, your team that was flying to Madagascar as we were talking. And then I'm just curious how long, the team will stay when you have, something like this.
Good question. It varies greatly. There's some anomalies, like our 2 very long responses. We actually have more. We've been engaged in Haiti for a very long time as well, in addition to the Middle East and Ukraine. As far as kind of natural disasters, it really depends. Some of them are as short as 2 weeks if it's a tornado in a small town in the United States, or, sometimes it could be up to 4, 5, 6 months. And there's just things that we look for as indicators for when it's time to go, which sometimes people find interesting. So, we look for when people are ready and able to cook for themselves at home. So that means that utilities are back on. It means that grocery stores have reopened, and not just reopened, but that their prices have stabilized. It's no longer these kind of price gouging situations after emergencies, where people can afford their ingredients again. A lot of countries, young people get most of their nutrition at school, so we look to see if schools have reopened, and especially if, small local restaurants have reopened, because the last thing that we want to do is be serving free food next to these small businesses that are crawling their way back to life as well. So we kind of look at all of those factors, and sometimes we come up with ways to kind of create a little bit of a bridge or a softer landing. So we'll put together food kits, for example, that have some of these pantry staples that families can take home and cook with. It'll be for a family of 5 for 2 weeks or something like that. Sometimes we'll even partner with farmers markets. If you think about after the Maui fires, the farmers there lost almost all of their business because so many restaurants burned down. And so one thing we did was we would buy produce from farmers on Maui and then provide those for free for people who needed them. And that was kind of towards the end of our stay there, and even after we physically left, we were still supporting that. So we do get creative. Most people know us for our hot meals, but there are some ways that we get creative to support communities like that. Yes, does that answer your question for duration?
So how long did you stay in Madagascar, the team?
Yes,
you remember?
I think I wrote that down for you. Let's see. I don't know. I want to say it was 2 months.
Okay.
I do know we ended up working with 13 different restaurant partners, and we were distributing meals to about 33 different places and feeding close to about 12,000 people a day. So that was awesome. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
yeah, 2 months.
2 months.
2
Okay.
months feels right.
So going back to my original questions about like,
Yes.
if there's spots, around the world that, in fact, you would love to have, contacts.
Yes, thank you so much for your help. Yes, for sure. Yeah, again, back to Asia. India is a monumentally huge place with just one neighborhood to the next serves different cuisines. So we could use a lot of help there. A lot of chefs are kind of tied to big hotel groups there, which can be very helpful. So that's kind of a good way in. Definitely, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. We expect them to have a lot of typhoons and flooding and things like that. Australia, New Zealand, I need to spend more time in. We have our eyes on some flooding and typhoon that's impacting New Zealand right now. And throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, we're always going to be spending a lot of time. I haven't touched places like Nicaragua. So many. I may send you a list to include in kind of your wrap up, just as a plea for.
No, absolutely, because I work as well for a global organization, and we are connected to food, but more on the ingredient side. But we have as well connections, with chefs, in different places. So there's maybe some spots that at least I can make an introduction to people with my colleagues that are, working in those areas. So, I mean,
thank you.
Just a thought. I'm not saying that it's good, but why not?
Yes, it's worth a try. I don't get a lot of no's. I will say that, which is pretty fantastic.
Sure.
Which says a lot about, I think, the simplicity of the mission and that I'm targeting the right people at least.
Yeah, but you were talking about places that it's not only about natural disaster, but it's about conflict. So curious about like how do you establish the relationship in places where the context might be politically fragile, or maybe some other, organizations are not welcoming you. So just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the thing that's most helpful is that we really stay to close to our value of being locally led. Wherever we go, it's not just the hurricanes and the fires, but in these conflict zones, in Ukraine, it's Ukrainians feeding Ukrainians, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's not a lot of, or any foreign boots on the ground. So it's communities helping each other. Same thing in Gaza. It's Palestinians feeding Palestinians. Right now in Lebanon, it's Lebanese feeding Lebanese. There's kind of less friction that way because, people are really kind of helping each other. We are very participatory and talking with, all of the organizations that are joining together to help in a certain situation. So we're very open and sharing knowledge and making sure we're not duplicating efforts. And there are obviously some places where we can have boots on the ground, like Afghanistan, for example, would be a challenge, but we have responded there several times in the past couple of years.
Okay.
Do that through working closely with partners that we vetted and that we trust. And, we still will have them give us daily briefings. We'll have them send us photos and videos of kind of where they're cooking the food and what the meals look like, so we can still ensure that the quality that we really rely on is still happening. So we do really get creative from time to time when we need to, because we want to be wherever we're needed.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think, at least for us, that everybody's in it for the right reasons, that, everybody is leading with empathy. I think, there certainly is opportunities for companies to come in and, support themselves for it to be an advantageous situation. We work with a lot of terrific corporate partners who are super generous and are most certainly in it for the right reasons, and they'll send their staff to come and volunteer. Places like United and Home Depot and Dollar General have just been extremely generous, helping us build out our fleet. We have a really cool fleet of specialized vehicles that can help us get the job done. Yeah, I hope that everybody that kind of gets involved is a good actor and recognizes that, one day, they could be the community that needs help, and that, they hope that people will be there for the right reasons as well.
Okay. So we have to talk a little bit about, José Andrés, of course. Chef
Okay.
José Andrés. You talked about the first, moments, when you went to Haiti and the creation of WCK, thinking that, food relief could be done differently. So just curious how much, because it's been, since 2010, right?
Yes.
Something like that.
Oh, yeah. Nailed it. Yep.
So how much does that funding philosophy, still shape the way you built the company today, or you continue working today?
Yeah, I think very much so. I mean, we're still definitely like a chef-led organization. Whether it's local chefs that are cooking at their own restaurants, or our chefs or local cooks cooking in our kitchens. I think the quality and the care that goes into our meals is still kind of what sets us apart from other organizations. But he had some other kind of founding principles that are still with us today. Another big one is that everybody's part of World Central Kitchen. They just don't know it yet. Back to, that's one of his favorite things to say. And like he will talk about ballparks and stadiums. Like they don't know it, but they're actually giant relief kitchens. Just like things like that. Like you just, when the moment calls for it, we have to get creative and adapt and use everything around us to kind of problem solve, which is very much a chef mentality. So that's a big one, I think. And
another one is the power of cooks, the cooks that have the power to change the world, correct? That's another thing that you said about this. So in your experience, what does that idea looks like, when it comes to, the operational reality?
Yeah, I think, his favorite was one of my favorite quotes of his talks about, when there's a engineering issue and a building is collapsing, like you call engineers. And when there's like a medical problem, you call doctors. So when there's like a food problem that needs to be solved, like we need to be calling chefs and cooks. Like that's absolutely it. And so, when we have these monster kitchens, and sometimes the most beautiful thing in the world is, between our full-time staff and contractors that we bring in and diverse local communities, our kitchen will have like people from 60 different countries, like all cooking shoulder to shoulder. And if that isn't like the most powerful thing right now, like I don't know what else is. And just cooks being such good listeners and connectors and builders, that is very much like how WCK does what we do. Yeah.
Okay. You talk about like, all the different events, and you gave a lot of, examples. I say events, situation, between like, flooding, fires, cyclones, typhoons, and obviously conflict. Do you have an example of something that was really hard to organize and to put in place?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, they're all hard,
Yes, by definition they are. Yes.
Yeah, they're all hard in their own ways. I think I would like mostly defer that question to some of my colleagues who have been on the ground. I think some of the most like emotionally taxing responses obviously are ones that are man-made, right? That's tough to wrap your head around. But also, sometimes we have to go back to the same place. And I think there was an example, like we were in Acapulco twice. They were hit by 2 back-to-back hurricanes within the span of about a year and a half. And the actual symbolism of we had built a bridge, if I remember correctly, to help connect places that were cut off. And that in the second storm, that bridge collapsed again. And so we had to like literally, wow. There was such a physical manifestation of like, some places are just in a position where they're going to continue to be affected, and how do we take care of them? And the answer to that has been to make these communities kind of resilient and prepared, and leave them sometimes with equipment, sometimes with WCK branding, so they can just start cooking right away without us having to even get there yet. They're all hard in their own ways. Sometimes we'll go to respond to a crisis in a country that excels at disaster response, and so like a place like Japan. And so sometimes the hard part is just listening. If someone says, we got this, we will say, okay, like let's just make sure that, there's no gaps that we can fill in with our specialized model. But like we want to have eyes on it ourselves to verify that everyone's taken care of. And then, we can politely exit. Okay. So sometimes it's knowing when to let go if things are already kind of well set up. They're all challenging, but all like extremely rewarding in their own way. Right now, we're involved in a really tough one. Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands were hit by a typhoon, and Guam seems to be relatively okay, but the islands like Saipan and Rota and Tinian are really struggling with fuel and water and obviously food. So those are kind of like long, challenging days right now to kind of get everybody set up to cook, but we're certainly getting those meals out and learning about the local culture and hiring as many local people as we can, same as usual. But that one was hard logistically to get there. Sometimes we can work hard to get places by boat or by private plane or by helicopter, when need calls from it. But in this case, the seas were too rough for anyone to move around, and the airports were closed. And so sometimes the frustration is like we're chomping at the bit to start cooking, but we like can't quite get there. And so we have to solve for that by, talking people through how to do it over the phone and getting them moving before we can even get our boots on the ground.
What do you do to change your mind? What's your focus for disconnecting, if you can?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and I'm pleased to say that World Central Kitchen does a really good job at taking care of people who are coming back from being away for months at a time and giving them truly we call it R&R, like rest and recuperation, maybe.
Okay, yeah.
Just time that's kind of untouchable time that they can really kind of truly unplug and process what they just experienced and celebrate their wins and kind of think through, what we could do better next time. Lots of support in terms of kind of mental health resources for people for us to talk to. I think everyone, recuperates differently. For me, the most stressful time for me is the first 72 hours, because that's when it's my job to convey to our team that's arriving on the ground everything that our chef corps members have to offer. And when I'm collecting, eyes and ears reports from the ground from our chef corps members and relaying that to the team that's arriving on the ground, that is when my colleagues are under the most pressure to get those first meals out. And really, when you get down to it, the purpose of my program, I'm there to serve the people that need these meals. I'm there to serve our chef corps members to have like a meaningful experience supporting our work. But at the end of the day, like my number one goal is to support my colleagues who are the ones doing that hard work on the. I want to cut down on the number of cold calls that they have to make so that kind of everything's lined up for them the best that it can be. They have trusted people that they can call and tell them what they want, and it'll happen. And that's my goal. So, I disappear for about 72 hours when we start something new, and then afterwards I'm careful to spend time outside away from my devices. I'm known for kind of walking around DC with two phones, kind of juggling back and forth and running into telephone poles and people. But yeah, I think everyone has different ways to connect. Some do it through cooking, some do it through spending time with family, some through exercise. For me is really helpful.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I have a fairly low stress job compared to, my colleagues who are the ones that are deployed 70% of the year.
If you want to talk about the other ways that, people can contribute, and maybe if you have, a specific website to send them to, if people wanted to, make sure that they participate.
Thank you for the opportunity. You're taking such good care of us. This is great. Yes, so behind me, we do have our own cookbook. The World Central Kitchen Cookbook came out a couple years ago. It is a beautiful collection of recipes, and it's organized in a really thoughtful way around our values. It's not by country, it's not by course, it's by our value. And so we have like an empathy chapter, we have an urgency chapter that features a lot of handheld things you can eat on the go, things like that. So it's a fabulous book. There's recipes from about 9 different chef corps members in there. Sophia De Leon in Philly, Eric Adjupon here in DC, Emerald Lagasse. We have also one of my favorite recipes in there is Meghan Markle's lemon cake, which I frequently make. It has beautiful crystallized rosemary sprigs on top, so that's a real conversation starter. But the recipes, don't just come from famous chefs. They come from everyone we've met along the way in our responses over the years, whether it's a volunteer or a local cook. It is very international. We encourage people to have cookbook club and invite their friends to make a dish from the book and bring it together and have a potluck and talk about what food and what comfort food means to them. Those events can be really meaningful. And yeah, as far as supporting World Central Kitchen, a really helpful one is to sign up to be in our volunteer corps. So this will mean that if we are responding to something in your backyard, you will receive an alert that we may be looking for volunteers to support us.
Okay.
And sometimes, those volunteer opportunities will be, divided between, people that have culinary experience and people that can assist with general duties, so that we can kind of triage and make sure we're making the most out of our volunteers. Our volunteers are so crucial to the heart of our mission. So I'd encourage anybody to sign up just in case you'd like to help. this is more about, again, supporting in your own community than it is kind of bopping around the world. It's just kind of, it's better for the planet. It's better for everybody that way.
Sure.
Obviously.
I mean, you're not a tourist agency, you're not a travel agency. So,
Exactly. And wherever we're responding, like the hotels are usually filled with emergency responders, with utility workers. It's very hard to find a place to stay. The roads are not in their normal conditions. It's dangerous to move around. And so we really try to pull from locals who know their way around. Yes. And then obviously, funding always helps, like fueling our mission. We are I'm proud of this. We're a very people funded organization. Something like 80% of our funding comes from individuals. Everybody from my mom giving $20 a month, even though I tell her she doesn't need to, up to some, incredible
Sure.
philanthropists.
Yeah.
So that's really special. And the rest kind of comes from foundations and corporations. So we don't accept government funding, which helps keep us relatively nimble. But yeah, and it just is really, I think, powerful to know that literally every dollar counts. There's no a form of support that's too small, because $5 is a meal or two, depending on where we are.
Exactly.
And that's extremely powerful. And we're really lucky to have support. We're looking to introduce ourselves to more places so we can kind of grow our donor base around the world. And then obviously if chefs are interested in what they heard today and they want to reach out to me, I'm just Laura at wck.org, really easy. I'm happy to chat through, all the different ways that we work with chefs at World Central Kitchen, not just the Chef Corps, but, from time to time, we'll be looking to add to our contractor base of chefs who travel to work with us. So that's exciting. But just, share this podcast with someone and, support both of us and kind of hearing this conversation and follow World Central Kitchen on social media. All of these things I mentioned can basically be done by going to wck.org.
Yep.
Super, super easy.
Very good. So thinking about you talking about like now rapid fire questions. So you were talking about, comfort food. So I'm curious, what is the one food for you that instantly communicates comfort to you?
Okay, this is fun. So I'm Lithuanian and Ukrainian, and there's a dish that my mom and I make for Christmas every year. The Lithuanian word is vedarai. And they're basically potato sausages. So you pulverize raw potatoes in a food processor with cooked bacon and onions. And then you stuff them into natural sausage casings and kind of bake them in like a shallow pan of oil so they get nice and browned and crispy. And the inside, when you bite into it, covered in sour cream, obviously, but when you bite into it, it's like a real kind of gelatinous texture. So that really, really is a strong taste of home.
It's really interesting. Every time we ask questions to someone about communicating comfort when it comes to food, it's always goes back to childhood.
Yes.
It's anchored in our, I think memories, I guess.
Yeah. What's yours these days?
Oh my gosh, that's good. Gee, I was not expecting that question, the ping pong game or the boomerang. I have to say, the one that is going to be always comforting for me, it's the quiche. Quiche Lorraine, because my mom was from that region, and I talk about it in my first book, Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door, where that's the first things I learned how to cook with my mom when I was, 6 or 7 years old. So when I learned how to make it from scratch, and every time I bake it at home, it's, it's that memory comes back, and, the aroma, the smell, and so on. And what I say, it comes as well with our tension between me and my mom when I was growing up and then becoming a teenager, and then you want to experiment, and I did other ingredients, and I did with salmons and goat cheese, and my mom was furious, and she was, no, it's not a quiche. You cannot call it that way because quiche Lorraine has only 5 ingredients, and that so this is this whole, I would say, experience and moment in life that that comes back. That's funny.
Yes.
So we talk about José Andrés. Can you define him in 3 words?
Ooh, okay. Oh my gosh. Energy, empathy, croquetas.
What is the last one, sir? You said
croquetas. All right, I'll switch that. I'll do
croquetas.
I'll do
Now I have to ask, pollo, croquetas de pollo, croquetas de Ramon.
I might edit that to jamon.
Jamon, yes.
When I picture him,
Jamón
whenever I
ibérico.
picture him, he's holding a leg of ham. Empathy, energy, and jamon.
And always a smile,
Yes,
on
of
his
course.
face. I had the chance to meet him, I think, twice, a long time ago, and he's always, very approachable, and it's a very nice man.
Yes, it was interesting for me to go from. I knew him first as a journalist, kind of covering his restaurants here in DC, and kind of his evolution and his stance on things, impacting the community, and so it's been a really interesting journey to get to see behind the scenes of this side of him and just how passionate he still is about this work 16 years in.
And it's very communicative, that's probably why he's so successful at what he does, not only professionally but as well with the foundations.
Yes.
So you're talking about empathy. So what are for you like the quality that matters most on the chef that you are bringing in? Talent, speed, empathy, resilience?
I think it's empathy because at the end of the day, I'm looking for people who have the most connections to other humans, that is, right? Like I'm looking for someone who has gotten to know their investor and like knows that they like have a warehouse that we could turn into a kitchen. It's always like a 6 degrees of separation things. Mm-hmm. And I think people who have a great deal of empathy are people who form the most lasting relationships and who can form those relationships quickly and kind of keep a lot of different people in their mind at the same time. Like to think that I'm one of those people. I think that's like the hard skill you need for this job is I have to be a good relationship builder. I have to remember how many kids does this chef have. I need to congratulate them on their next restaurant. Like I really need to keep tabs on them, which was easier when there was like 100 of them. Now that there's closer to 600 of them. But I think
you have a computer, you have AI, all of that can help.
That's true. I just use AI to build a chef discovery engine.
Yeah.
It won't replace my research and my vetting and my relationship building, but it's a good jump start. But yeah, I think to come back to it, it's empathy because those people tend to have the most meaningful relationships that they can call upon when things get hard.
Okay. And if there's a chef that you wish more people knew about after that, you experience him or her?
So many. There's so many. I have a chef friend, Travis Milton. He has volunteered with us 3 times now, which takes a lot. He puts down what he's doing and he comes and he joins us. And he was most recently at Nice Wonder Farm, which is in Bristol, Virginia, kind of on the border with Bristol, Tennessee. And he really is a strong advocate for Appalachian cuisine, and especially telling people that the Appalachia was actually, one of the first melting pots, and so there's tremendous black cooks and black chefs, and there's Nepalese and indigenous people there that are making, incredible meals, and he's done a lot to kind of elevate that region of the United States. But he is always willing to. He's always a yes. He always really develops relationships with the cooks that he meets on the ground. I know that he still has WhatsApps with the Jamaican cooks that he met in Jamaica. I think he sent them a couple cases of Red Bull to keep them going after he left the island. Just, people like him that do it. And one of the things he talks about is that, which I have him warn other chefs on what to expect when they come and join one of our responses. And he says, you will be the most exhausted you've ever been, but it's the best kind of exhausted. And so he's got a lot of wise words for other people that kind of come in behind him to volunteer. So he's great. He's really excited to see what he does in his next chapter of life. But there's hundreds of Travises in my network. I talk about them all, and really.
I know it's a tough question. It's like someone.
I love all my children.
Interview me. What is like the most interesting episode of the podcast? I'm like, it's a tough one.
I have an amazing woman in Grenada, Chef Belinda Bishop, and I had the opportunity to bring her to a big chef conference in Copenhagen, and I had a feeling that there wouldn't be too many Black women from the Caribbean represented, and I really want people to know about Caribbean foodways. I mean, these women can cook and are brilliant, and she's just like a shining star of mine with the best attitude, who really just helped us reach every single corner of her area when we needed to respond to Hurricane, I think Beryl was the big one. So many of them. Just I really am trying to build out a diverse network, both in terms of cultural background, but in terms of professionally as well.
When you think about the future of your role at WCK. So what's the first word that comes to mind?
Expansion, scalability, expansion. That's what World Central Kitchen is thinking about in general right now, because we're going to be needed in more places more often. And so we're just trying to build relationships and all different kinds. I sit on a team with the head of our volunteer corps, with the head of our response corps, which are our network of incredible contractors, and just getting relationships in place so we can move faster and scaling this thing so that we can really meet the moment and do so with communities leading the way. That's the only way we'll be able to be everywhere we need to be.
Expansion. Okay. Laura, thank you very much for being on the show. I'm glad that we connected several weeks or months back, in DC. I'm glad that we were able to share with the audience, the impact of WCK and then, your role there. So
Thank
for
you.
everyone, make sure that, to go and on WCK.org.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.